Okay, good afternoon to all of you. Let me
Good
present the
afternoon, ma'am.
screen first. Can you see the screen?
No, ma'am.
Can you see the presentation?
No, ma'am.
Now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Welcome to you all to this 8th lecture on under module 4. In the previous session, we have seen about the anatomy of a file read and anatomy of a file write. As I told you, this is very important topic, so I just want to recap it once again. Okay, this is the figure that depicts how actually various controls are being transferred between HDFS client, name node, and the data nodes while a file is being read from the HDFS client. So when the HDFS client attempts to read a file from the HDFS cluster, it initially gives an open call. One second, there is issue with this pen. I'll just try to resolve this. Okay, so when a HDFS client here gives an open method call to this distributed file system in turn generates a remote processor call to name node. Now this name node will just check whether the file is existing or not, which the HDFS client is attempting to read. Because when the file doesn't exist, then it throws IO exception. If the file is existing, then initial blocks of the file where those blocks are actually residing, that block addresses will be sent to
Screen is
distributed
not
file
visible, ma'am.
system. Huh?
Ma'am, PPT is not visible, ma'am.
Not visible. One second. Now?
Yes, ma'am, visible.
Okay. Okay, we are discussing about this anatomy of a file read, right? So when the name node, sorry, I'll start from the beginning. When HDFS client attempts to read a file from HDFS cluster, it gives an open call on distributed file system class. When this distributed file system class gets the open method call from HDFS client, it in turn generates remote processor call to name node in order to get the block addresses of the file that it wants to read. Now this name node sends the initial block addresses back to distributed file system, and this distributed file system hands over data input stream, FS data input stream object to HDFS client so that it can read the data from that stream. Now this FS data input stream again in turn wraps DFS data input stream to which a read method is sent by the HDFS client. Now this DFS data input stream in turn invokes a read method with the data nodes, and the closest of the data nodes means with respect to the proximity calculation, whichever data node is nearest to the client, that data nodes are selected and they are on which the blocks of this file are actually residing, and those addresses are given to the DFS input stream. Now the data will be read from each of these data nodes by the HDFS client by continuously giving this read call to this data input stream. Right now, when the blocks of the location, when the blocks of the file are being read, at the same time, DFS data input stream also consults the name node once again for the remaining block addresses also to complete the file read. Now, when all the block locations are available, one after the other, the data nodes will serve the data that is to be read by HDFS client, and after the file end is reached, HDFS client calls a close method which will actually close the DFS input stream, DFS data input stream as well as FS data input stream. Now in this process, if any data node fails, then immediately that will be notified to the name node by DFS data input stream so that it will not repeatedly access the same node for other block address, for other blocks to read. Now, if also it performs this DFS input data input stream also performs some checksums in order to see whether the data is consistent from the state it is read to the state from the state it is written to the state it is read. And if there are still any failed nodes, then immediately name node will send the address of another data node where the replica of that block is available and the data is read from that block. Okay, that is how file read happens. Now, how a file write happens, what exactly goes on in the background. Now, when a HDFS client wants to create a file, then it gives a create command on distributed file system class, and this distributed file system class invokes a remote processor call and requests the name node to create a new file with the said name. Now the name node performs some checking, like if the file is already existing, then it just throws IO exception. Why? Because it can't create a new file with the same name again. And if the file is not existing, then it will see whether the HDFS client is granted with enough permissions in order to create the new file. Now, if everything is okay, then the name node passes the address of the for that particular file on the cluster where exactly the file has to be written. Now, this distributed file system in turn again passes a FS data output stream object to HDFS client from to which it can write the data. Now, this HDFS client invokes a write method on this FS data output stream, which in turn wraps distributed data, DFS data output stream. Now, this DFS data output stream in turn uses data stream. There is a component called as data streamer, which will maintain two queues. One is the data queue and one is the acknowledgement queue. So what data has to be written onto the data nodes, that data will be converted into packets, and those packets are will be ready to be written to the queue of the data nodes. Now this name node informs the data streamer onto which data nodes the block addresses are created, and this data streamer will pass the data packets first to the name node available in the pipeline, and next that same packet will be passed on to the second name data node available in the pipeline. And once the data is written onto that data node, again that same packet will be passed on to the third data node in that pipeline. This is to maintain the default replication factor 3. For each block of data, 3 copies have to be maintained. That is why 3 data nodes will be always available in the pipeline. Now, acknowledgement queue also maintains the same data packets, so that once the data packet is written into one data node and the acknowledgement queue receives the acknowledgement that the block is written correctly, immediately that data packet will be removed from the acknowledgement queue. This is to ensure that in case of data node failure, erroneous data blocks are not available on the data node. So whenever a data node during the process of this write, whenever a data node fails, then immediately whatever data packets are there in the acknowledgement queue, they will be added to the front of the data queue so that those packets will not be lost and they'll be written to the other two data nodes available in the pipeline. And the name node also searches for another data node which is healthy in order to meet the replication factor of 3 so that it can be written onto extra one more data node, right? And once the write operation is complete, then DFS data output stream signals to the name node that the write operation is completed, and HDFS client calls close method on this DFS data output stream in order to close the entire streams that are open. This is how a file write happens in the background when HDFS client attempts to write a file onto HDFS cluster. Now today's topics we are going to see about coherency model and parallel copying with disk CP. Now coherency model for a file system describes the data visibility of reads and writes for a file. Now after creating a file, it is visible in the file system namespace, right? Name node creates the metadata for that particular file that is created, and that will be visible in the file system namespace. For that, you can see the template here. When you create a new path instance and create a file system, create a file in the file system using create method fs.create, use the path in which the file has to be created. Now, if you want to see whether the file is existing or not, you can just use assert that method. Assert that method will take the existing details and compares it with the expected details. So fs.existp, if it returns true, then if it is the file is already existing is true, both will be tallied. Then assert that function results in true, which indicates that the file is created. The file is already existing. Okay. Now any content written to the file is not guaranteed to be visible, even if the file stream is flushed. So the file appears to have a length of 0. So when you are attempting to create a file and it is visible in the file system namespace, now any content written to the file can't be immediately seen even if the stream is flushed. Why? Because when a current block is being written, that will not be visible to the user, right? That is why even if the stream is flushed, until the out stream is closed, it is not visible to the user. So the file appears to have a length of 0. So that is what is being checked here. After creating a file with the file path, now through the output stream, you are writing the content by using getBytes method. You are just using UTF encoding so that server side logic can be omitted. Now out flush. Now you are flushing the data in the output stream completely onto the file by using out.flush. But immediately, if you want to see the file status, still the content here, see the get length, using the get file status get length method, if you compare it with the current contents of the file, it will be 0. Why? Because though the stream of data is flushed out of the output stream, still it is in the process of being written. So immediately that will not be reflected until all the block is completed to be written on the disk. So in order to make a content, make the content that is being written to the file visible to the client, you should see that the entire block is written. Only streams of data, buffer of data, if it is flushed and written onto the screen, written onto the disk, it is not visible to the user. Only once the entire block is completed to be written onto the disk, only then it will be visible to the user. That is why after flushing a buffer content, if you see assert that, get the file status, get its length, if it is compared to 0, still it gives true. Why? Because there is no content still visible to the user. Now, once more than a block's worth of data has been written, this is what I'm trying to say. Once more than a block's worth of data has been written, the first block will be visible to new readers. So what we need to understand here is that only the current block that is being written to the file system will not be visible to the user. All the previous blocks can be seen by the readers. Now, HDFS provides a method for forcing all buffers to be synchronized to the data nodes via the sync method. This is the main method that has to be used in order to synchronize all the buffers to the data nodes, which is a method on FS data output stream. Now, after a successful return from sync, HDFS guarantees that the data written up to that point in the file has reached all the data nodes in the right pipeline and is visible to all the new readers. So what does this sync take care of? This sync will ensure that HDFS guarantees that the data written up to that particular point in the file has reached all the data nodes in the pipeline, waiting for the data to be written in order to make the replication factor 3. Right? So until that is written, it will not show the data to the writers. But once this once this sync returns successfully, then it is visible to all the new readers. That is shown with this code. You're creating a new file in the file system, and you're writing the contents to the output stream and flushing the contents. Now you should also call sync method through output stream so that it ensures that all the data has reached the data nodes in the right pipeline. With that, you can now again use that assert method and check the file status. Now the content of the file will be equal to the length of that file. So this indicates that the content is written to the file. So the file status returns as that same bytes as how much data is written to the file. So what you have to remember in this case is once the data is flushed from the output stream, it should also call the sync method so that the data so that it ensures that the data reaches all the data nodes in the right pipeline. Now, this behavior is similar to file sync system call in POSIX, that is Portable Operating System Unix system interface that commits buffer data for a file descriptor. Now, for example, using the standard Java API to write a local file, we are guaranteed to see the content after flushing the stream and synchronizing. Means after flushing the output stream and calling the sync method on the output stream, it is guaranteed that all the content is available in the file system along with its default replication factor, that is 3 in this case if you're working with multiple nodes on a cluster. Now file output stream, once again you are just seeing whether the data is written onto the file or not. You have just flush the data out of the output stream so that it reaches the data nodes and out get file disk. Now whatever data written onto the disk, whether it is synced to the disk or not, whether it is properly written to the disk on the data nodes or not, you can also use getFD method, out.getFD sync, to ensure that it reached all the data nodes in the right pipeline. Again, you can use the same assert method in order to compare what is expected from the file and what is actually with the file. The length of the file is compared with what is expected to be written to the file. If both are same, then we know that the data has reached the data nodes and safely written onto the disk on those data nodes. Now, closing a file in HDFS performs an implicit sync too. So if you want to close a file, it also takes care that implicitly it runs the sync method in the background so that it ensures safe writing of the contents to the file onto the data nodes in the right pipeline. So that is what we are doing here. We are creating a new file in the file system, writing the data to the output stream. And when you use this method, when you use this method out.close, then it also implicitly runs sync method with the output stream, so that when we see whether the content of the file content.length is equal to what is being written to the file, if both are equal, we can immediately say that the data is safely written onto the disk of which hosts that particular file. Now, what are the consequences for application design? With no calls to sync, you should be prepared to lose up to a block of data in the event of client or system failure. So if you're not using this sync method, then you should be ready to face the loss of data up to at least one block of data. Why? Because it can be, say, if the sync is not implemented, the data is flushed onto the data nodes, but it doesn't see whether they are written onto all the data nodes in the pipeline. So there is a risk of losing up to a block of data if this sync method is not called by the output stream. For many applications, this is unacceptable. So you should call sync at suitable points, such as after writing a certain number of records or number of bytes. So you need to determine those intervals of time where the sync has to be called frequently. Either after writing some number of records, you need to call the sync method, or number of bytes to a file, you need to call the sync method, so that it acts as a checkpoint which ensures that the data is safely written onto all the data nodes in the right pipeline. Now, though the sync operation is designed to not unduly tax HDFS, it does have some overhead. Though it doesn't actually deteriorate the performance of HDFS, it adds to its performance, still it has some overhead. So there is a trade-off between data robustness and throughput. So if you want to maintain the consistency of data, then better use the sync method. But if you want to speed up the execution of the processing, if you want to speed up the processing, in that case, you may compromise with executing this sync method, sync operation. Now, what constitutes an acceptable trade-off is application dependent, and suitable values can be selected after measuring your application's performance with different sync frequencies. You can set up the frequency. Based on that, this sync method will be eventually called whenever the data is written onto the files in the file system. Now let us see how parallel copying is done by using distcp component. Now the HDFS access patterns that we have seen so far focus on only single threaded access, right? Only one access is supported at one point of time. Only one read operation or write operation takes place. Only single threaded access is granted. But it's possible to act on a collection of files, but for efficient parallel processing of these files, you would have to write a program yourself, because you want to support multiple threads, you want to support multiple processes. In that case, you would have to write a program yourself in order to maintain parallel threads. Now, Hadoop comes with a useful program called distcp for copying large amounts of data to and from Hadoop file systems in parallel, so that it can serve multiple requests of the HDFS clients. Now, the canonical use case for distcp is for transferring data between two HDFS clusters. Say in the scenario where you want to transfer data between two HDFS clusters, either in the same data center or geographically apart on a different data center. Now, if the clusters are running identical versions of Hadoop, the HDFS scheme is appropriate. Remember, two things you have to remember. If the clusters are running on identical versions, which URI scheme use, and if they are running on two different versions of Hadoop, then what URI scheme you have to use. Now, if the clusters are running identical versions of Hadoop, the HDFS scheme is appropriate, and you can use the command like this: %Hadoop distcp HDFS you're taking from name, you're taking it from name node 1 from a root, say FFO, and you're copying it onto name node 2. Screen is visible, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
It's visible, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So see this command now. If the clusters are running identical versions of Hadoop, the HDFS scheme is appropriate, means that HDFS URI is appropriate. And you can use the command like this, percentage Hadoop, discp, use the discp command and read the contents of FO directory under name node 1 of the HDFS cluster and copy it onto name node 2 onto directory BAR under HDFS. Okay, so what exactly it does? This will copy the /FO directory and along with its contents from the first cluster, this is the first cluster, to the bar directory, to this bar root directory on the second cluster. This is your second cluster. So the second cluster ends up with the directory structure. Now, what will be the directory structure in the second cluster? /bar/FO. Why? Because you're storing this name node 1's directory contents onto name node 2's directory contents under the root /bar. That is why it is storing it in a hierarchy of this directory structure. That is /bar/FO. Now, if /bar doesn't exist, say in the name node 2, if this root is not existing, then it will be created first and the contents of FO directory are copied under this bar directory. Now you can specify multiple source paths and all will be copied to the destination. Source paths must be absolute. Remember, source paths always should be in absolute manner. Means it should not be a relative path. It should be an absolute path. You have to mention right from the root, root directory. Now, by default, discp will skip files that already exist in the destination, but they can be overwritten by supplying -override option. Say if the files are already existing, then discp will skip files that already exist in the destination. If the files are existing, it will not overwrite. But if you want to forcefully overwrite the existing files in the directory that is in the destination cluster or in the destination name node, you can use -override option. Now you can also update only the files that have changed. Say sometimes you are copying the content of name node 1 to name node 2. Name node 1, all contents might not have been changed. In that case, only those files that are updated can be written. In that case, you can -update option. By using this, you can only update the files that have changed. Means any modification done to that file. Now, there are some options to control the behavior of discp, including ones to preserve file attributes, ignore failures, and limit the number of files or total data copied. There are various options available with this discp. You can enable those attributes according to your requirement. Now, discp is implemented as a MapReduce job where the work of copying is done by the maps in parallel across the cluster. Remember here, multiple threads are being processed, multiple threads are being executed because they have to serve multiple requests from the HDFS clients. In such case, all this discp, all the commands using this discp are implemented as MapReduce jobs where the work of copying from one cluster to other cluster is done by the map as a map job that run in parallel across the cluster. There are no reducers in this case. When we are using MapReduce job, we are using only maps in this case. Why? Because maps will be responsible to copy data from one cluster to another cluster. So we are not using any reducers here because we are not consolidating any data given by the reduce phase. So each file is copied by a single map and this CP tries to give each map approximately the same amount of data by bucketing files into roughly equal allocation. So it will accumulate the data and tries to give same amount of data to each map job in order to copy it from one cluster to another cluster. Now the number of maps is decided as follows. How it is decided is, because it is a good idea to get each map to copy a reasonable amount of data to minimize overheads in task setup, each map copies at least 256 MB. So the basic unit of data that is being copied by a map job is set as 256 megabytes. But if you want to copy around 1 GB of data, then it will be divided into 4 map jobs, so that each map job will be responsible to copy 256 MB around. And if you are having 1000 GB of data, then it can be reduced, then it can be divided into some 100 map jobs and distributed onto some 10 clusters, say. And say if you want to allocate 1000 maps in this case, for example, -m1000 if you use, it would allocate 1000 maps, each copying 1 GB on average. But normally map jobs will be restricted to 20 jobs, 20 map jobs per cluster, so that it will not consume more bandwidth. Now, when you try to use DISC-CP between two HDFS clusters that are running different versions, the copy will fail. Why? Because in previous case, see in this case, look here, in this command, we have understood that the data is being copied between two clusters which are running identical versions of Hadoop. But if they are running different versions of Hadoop, then HDFS URI will raise errors. So when you try to use DISC-CP between two HDFS clusters that are running different versions, the copy will fail if you use HDFS protocol, because the RPC systems are incompatible. The remote processor call systems may be incompatible. Then in that case, you have to try with HFTP. When you try to use DISC-CP between two HDFS clusters that are running different versions, then the copy task will fail. So the remedy for this is to use HFTP file system. You understood about this in Hadoop file system implementations, right? HFTP, this is Hypertext File Transfer Protocol with Hadoop file system that is being implemented. So the remedy to overcome this failure of the copying from one cluster to another cluster, running different versions of Hadoop, in that case, you can use the read-only HTTP based HFTP file system to read from the source. Now the job must run on the destination cluster so that the HDFS RPC versions are compatible. In this case, HDFS RPC versions will be compatible, so that the job must run on the destination cluster only. Now, if you want to do this with the previous command, you can rewrite the command like this: %Hadoop DISC-CP. You're copying data from one cluster to another cluster, but here the URI used is HFTP. HDFS, and the destination cluster, it can use HDFS. So you're using here URI HFTP. You're using URI HFTP in the source cluster and copying by using the appropriate port contents from this FO directory and copying it onto your name node 2 on a different cluster under the root directory bar. But here, remember, you are using destination URI as HDFS itself. Why? Because source URI has already been used to get the compatible version which works with destination clusters HDFS URI. Now using the newer web HDFS protocol, now rather than using HFTP, you can also use web HDFS on both source cluster and the destination cluster also. Remember, whereas HFTP and HSFTP support only read and write operations, web HDFS in turn adds one more extra feature, that is Kerberos authentication. That is why we can also use web HDFS protocol in order to copy data between the clusters. Now using the newer web HDFS protocol, which can replace HFTP, it is possible to use HTTP for both the source and destination clusters without hitting any wire incompatibility problems like that would have been arised with HDFS if Hadoop clusters are running different versions of Hadoop. Okay, so for that you are rewriting the same command of distcp again, percentage Hadoop distcp. Now instead of HDFS URI or HFTP URI, in both the source cluster as well as the destination cluster, you are using web HDFS, copying the data from the root directory FO of name node 1 and copying it onto the second, that is destination clusters root bar onto name node 2. Okay, in both the cases the URI used is web HDFS. You are not using HFTP in this case and HDFS in the destination clusters case. You can use in both the cases web HDFS because it enables to use HTTP for both the source and destination clusters without having any incompatibility problems. Now another variant is to use an HDFS HTTP proxy as the distcp source or destination, which has the advantage of being able to set firewall and bandwidth controls. So if you want to implement extra firewall or any bandwidth control policies, in that case, rather than using this web HDFS, you can install a HTTP proxy as an intermediary between the client and the cluster, so that this HTTP proxy will be able to implement any bandwidth control mechanisms or any firewall controls. Now in the next coming session, I thought actually I would conclude this module in this class, but it will be too much crowded. So let us postpone 2 more topics left in this module to the next session. That is keeping an HDFS cluster balanced and how to work with Hadoop archives in order to store the data for later use. Any doubts till here? Are you understanding this concept? Once I complete the other 2 topics in this chapter, I'll give you the notes as well as one assessment also, which you have to take up. Right? Any doubts to be discussed now, or we can do it still offline also? I'll end the meeting then.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, meet you in the next lecture. See you on
Thank you, ma'am.
Thursday. Okay, bye.